Hi, I'm Paul Carroll and welcome to this month's Cameracraft video tutorial on focusing. You may think focusing with an autofocus camera is pretty easy. Just depress the shutter release button until the lens focuses and then take the shot, yeah? Well, it's not quite that straightforward, with DSLRs offering several autofocus modes, which are designed for different subjects. In this video, we're going to bring you 3 great focusing tips for better shots of moving subjects, still life and portraits too. We'll look at your camera's autofocus targets and show you when to select them automatically or manually. Explain the differences between single and continuous lens servos, and we've got a great tip using live view too. We're using a Canon 500D, and although all this focusing advice is generic, if you've got a different DSLR, the names and locations of the autofocus controls might differ a little. So make sure you refer to your instruction manual and then give our focusing tips a go. All right, let's get started. We're going to use Ben here for all 3 of our shots today, and we're going to start by looking at portraits. For a well-focused portrait, the most important element is getting the eyes sharp. So start by setting your autofocus mode to single point. On the 500D, it's called one shot, and select the central autofocus target by pressing the target selection button and then hitting set. Now, before focusing, roughly frame up the portrait so that you're the right distance from your subject, and then position the central AF target over the subject's closest eye. Next, half depress the shutter release button to focus the lens, and when the focus indicator lights up in the viewfinder, keep the shutter release button half depressed to lock the focus. On some cameras you can hold down the body mounted AFL button, which has the same effect. Now recompose the portrait, framing your subject more centrally, and from now on don't move any closer or further away from your subject, or the eyes won't be in focus. And then fully depress the shutter release button to take the shot. If you accidentally release the shutter button or the AFL button before taking the shot, simply skip back a step, focus, lock and recompose again. Check the LCD screen to make sure that the eyes are sharp. And there you go, you can see we've got a great portrait. Another tip is to move the active autofocus target. So you use a target that's closer to your subject's eyes. And that way you don't need to move the camera too far when you're recomposing. Okay, time for our action shot. As you can see, Ben's ready for the action shot. But before we can take a picture, we need to set up our camera. Change the autofocus mode from one shot to AI servo. On most other cameras this is called AFC and means the lens will continue focusing as long as you keep the shutter button half depressed. We also need to change the autofocus target selection from manual to automatic. To be able to fire off a quick burst of shots, you'll need to change your drive mode from single shot to continuous. On some cameras this is done using a body mounted button like this, or failing that via the menu. And if you get a choice for the quickest burst of shots, make sure you select the continuous high mode. Right, I'm going to track Ben as he rides his bike and take a few shots. Now, as the subject moves, track it, doing your best to keep the subject located centrally in the frame. Keep the shutter release button half depressed so the lens continues to focus. Then, when the subject is in the right place, fully depress the shutter to fire off a series of shots. Another tip is to get your positioning right, because your autofocus will find it much easier to track a subject that's moving laterally rather than directly towards you. Right, so that's focusing for action done. Now let's do still life. Focusing manually ensures greater precision when you're shooting a macro or still life shot. And live view offers a handy new feature for even greater accuracy. And I'm going to show you how it's done by taking a close-up of Ben's bike here. So let's start by changing the lens servo from autofocus to manual and activate the live feed view. Now zoom the lens in to 55mm and position it roughly the minimum focusing distance in front of your subject, which is around 30cm. Now focus the lens until you get the image on the LCD screen sharp. And if you can't get it sharp, you're probably too close to your subject, So move the camera further back and focus again. Next, magnify the view by pressing the plus button on the back of the camera. Now use the D-pad to scroll over to the area that you want to be in sharp focus. And then fine-tune your focus using the focus ring. Once you've got the area roughly in focus, you can then rock in and rock out until you're happy that that area is sharp, and then take the shot. Review the image on the LCD screen, but make sure you zoom in tightly and check that it's sharp in the area that you wanted. And that's something you should do after you've tried out all of our focusing techniques. I hope you've really enjoyed this Cameracraft video tip on focusing. Make sure you grab your camera and give these great techniques a try, and look forward to well-focused shots no matter what the subject. Okay, see you next month.